Thank you, Greg.
I'd like to provide you with my perspective of the economic impact report as developed by RDN. This is based on having spent the majority of the past 6 years up in North Dakota observing the impact of the influx of hundreds, if not thousands, of temporary and part-time workers commuting into the oil fracking fields. I was engaged by Williams County in Williston, North Dakota, to help them overcome the negative impact of that influx of workers and the environmental problems created by the oil fracking. I've also had the opportunity to provide firsthand observation in a number of Nevada mining communities, mainly in rural, isolated areas, under a contract with the Nevada Department of Transportation to develop an impact of capital facility requirements for their needs. As previously mentioned, I've been a consultant on a number of capital development projects that included the development of an environmental impact statement and economic impact statements, and I participated in that. So I've got the unique perspective of having a mindset of knowing where the authors come from and what their general prejudice might be towards the development of that data. And then I've been a consultant to governments in the analysis of projects and development of capital projects for the past 55 years. Next slide, please. The nature of my observations will be concerned with my firsthand observations of the nature of mine work environment and impact on the community. Mine working is 12 hours on, 12 hours off, underground, dangerous, and very, very much in need of trained personnel to provide those services. The potential source of employees particularly for the below grade and the industrial activity, the impact on the quality of life in the community and the life of the workers that are coming into the community. And then I'll be assessing my review of the economic impact estimate on the community and closing with the potential risks associated with this particular project. Next slide, please.
Yeah, the economic impact indicates that there is positive economic impact to the community based upon increased employment, construction spending, the property tax increment that goes to the county, sales tax that might be retained by the county. And then on the negative side, the cost of government services to be able to accommodate the operation of the mine, compliance monitoring by RISE and others, the impact on property values, which is either inconclusive or non-existent relative to the documentation that they provided in the recommendations. And there's nothing in the RDN report that really talks about the cost of environmental degradation or, gosh forbid, the health of the people in the community. The basis of this economic report needs to identify to the approval authority that the benefits must be substantial to overcome the negative environmental impact. The benefits must be very substantial and overriding to be able to overcome the negative side of the environmental impact study. Next slide. Mining is a different kind of a job. In the report, as presented by Rice also, we're talking about a workforce of predominantly below grade and industrial workers, some 270 of those workers working 12-hour shifts on, 12 hours off for a 7-day work week. Then they go away for 7 weeks or go home and then come back. So they're only in the county or working 50% of the time to get their full job. We contend that the housing pattern for those commuting workers is different from the 2.4 family members assumed in the RDN report for the economic impact. The majority of those workers, we believe, will live outside the county, commute in 50% of the time. Most or many will be living in a shared rental with multiple people per bedroom, or live in a trailer, a recreational vehicle, or a camper. Their spending pattern in the community will not be that of a typical 2.4 person family. It'll be a single person with shared rental and spending money for 14 days worth of meals per month. They will be unlikely to spend the majority of their pay, whatever their take-home pay is, in Nevada County, being that they will only be here 50% of the time. Next slide. The actual calculation that used in the RDN report was that all 312 Rise Gold employees with a gross payroll average of $122,000 per year will contribute that amount, pour that into the local economy at $38 million a year. Then with the multiplier effect for indirect and induced employment, adding 50%, it will have a total impact of $61 million per year. In my analysis, which increased the number of commuting workers on this 12-hour shift basis, 7 days in a row, and then going home for 7 days, I believe that the workforce is more likely to be probably like 58 or more % out of county commuters coming in, rather than only the 32% for 99 employees assumed in the RDN report. Reducing their contribution down to disposable take-home pay after backing out the 25% benefits, the 7% tax, you get to about a $91,000 per year disposable income, but much of that is mortgages, buying automobiles, payments for Amazon, things out of county. And so I believe that the actual amount of money poured into the local economy, not outside the county borders, is more like $54,000 for a resident that is employed in the Rise mine. For the workers that are commuting in and only here 50% of the time living in shared housing, my estimate was it's about $20,000 a year actually spent to contribute to the local economy. That reduces the annual economic impact in the county to $15 million, about 1/4 of what the RDN report provided. Next slide. From a construction perspective, the report indicates there will be an immediate impact to the economy because of the construction of an unknown amount of work that hasn't been quantified in the economic study, although there was some strong language in the environmental impact report that identified the magnitude of the construction. The construction is very specialized, it's industrial. I do not believe that the type of construction is compatible with the smaller, more general purpose contractors in Nevada County. I believe that the type of construction lends itself to a design, build, delivery, or a construction manager at risk type of delivery method, much more compatible with large experienced contractors who are found probably best in Sacramento area with a large and available workforce to complete this magnitude of construction in an 18-month timeframe, which I find to be very aggressive relative to the design, permitting process, and the construction. Whatever the level of construction is, I believe that most of the construction funding for labor and materials, about 70% or more, will go out of county, not be retained in county at all. The RDN estimate indicated a tax benefit to the county of the construction work of $17,000 a year, pretty minimum, even considering the basis that it was based upon RISE data. Next slide. Sales tax retained in the county was calculated based upon all of the gross payroll of all employees being retained in and poured into the local economy, $61 million per year at full production 4 years in the future. That would mean, from a sales tax perspective, the county would be expected to retain $611,000 a year from the sales tax. My analysis, which reduces the employee spending down to a in-county contribution and reduces the commuters to a $20,000 per year in-county contribution to the economy, yields $15 million a year and reduces the sales tax retained by the county for other purposes to 1/4 of the RDN report, a rather minimal $153,000 per year. Next slide. Impact on local government services. At full production, the minimum is $17,000 per year contribution to the county coffers, the county budget. At a maximum, $700,000 per year, quite a long range. If one is a little more realistic and looks at the average of $350,000 a year, we should be taking a look at how that compares to the costs identified by the sheriff for an additional staff, $120,000, and increased cost by the city of Grass Valley that they tabulate in the RDN report at $170,000 a year. So at the average level of production and services, we're really looking at a near break even, $290,000 increased cost to local government and a $350,000 increased income to local government. And all of that is only realized by the government if the income is based upon 100% of the current gold price. And if the cost of mining that gold is only 50% of the national average per ounce of gold mined, and the production in the mine over time is at least 45% of what we believe to be a very optimistic and unverified guess as to what the assumed resources are, or the assumed reserves are. So I think it's very sketchy data at best that comes up with a break even for the local government and only at the full production rate. Next slide. There's also risks associated with all this, as Dr. Chambers talked about. There's a big risk that the total gold reserves are less than the level projected. If they're less, they would result in lower mineral reserve tax benefit to the county. If they've underestimated the operating costs, and reality is that the costs go up, that will reduce the profitability, that will reduce the mineral reserve tax accordingly. If there's less than 80 years of operation, if they run out of reserves, again, the impact would be a reduction of the economic impact. Then there's the unforeseen and of course uncosted problems of what happens with an environmental accident. The cost of disaster recovery and site cleanup might be borne by we, the taxpayers and citizens and the county. What about bankruptcy, which has happened before with gold mines? It's happened prior with the proponent. The county may be subject to clean up the sites and further environmental mitigation. The sudden closing of the mine for other economic reasons could result in some rather significant and immediate unemployment of those employees that are then resident in the county. And of course, what if other wells dry up? Wells that have not been mitigated by the basis of the approval process. The impact on individual properties could be catastrophic if other wells dry up in the future. Next slide. So I would suggest that there be certain conditions of approval added to the agreement, as Dr. Chambers alluded to strengthen compliance monitoring, to make sure they don't get by with a sleight of hand, an increase in oversight by professionals rather than relying on a lot of the self-performance and self-monitoring suggested by Rice, added financial and tax audit requirements just to make sure that they don't have two sets of books, one that undervalues the level of asset to reduce the taxes, or one that increases the cost of production beyond what it is to reduce the profitability. And above all, to ensure, to insist on a bond or insurance, if you will, to cover all of the foreseeable and hopefully provide a fund for risk mitigation for the disasters that might occur. It would be nice to have teeth in the agreement so that the actual community benefits that are received by we, the people of the county, over the next 8 to 80 years is equal or exceeds the benefits that are included in the economic study which is the project approval was based upon. Next slide. And the economic conclusions that I come to by looking at my listing of the data is that the RISE data is questionable because a lot of it was written a few years ago with a perspective of promoting the project, making a favorable projection to get county approval, and to possibly get additional investors. So it was written within the context of trying to paint the best picture possible for financing or investment and or approval. I also believe that the benefits to the community are substantially overstated by looking at the full payroll of all of the employees as opposed to only the disposable income spent in the county, that the costs of operation are understated, risks are totally ignored, and the cost of risks are not mentioned. And if you take a look at the maximum benefit in the RDN report to the county, the maximum benefit at full production of $750,000 a year, that works out to be $7 per resident per year. I asked the question, is $7 per resident per year at full production under the very optimistic assumptions used in the RDN report worth an overriding consideration, given the significant unmitigated environmental impacts that aren't costed, the many unknown costs that could be incurred, and the substantial future risks? I'm not sure it's worth risking our health and environmental degradation for $7 per resident per year. Thank you.